What would you say to somebody who you tell them that and they're like, I just don't like budgeting?
Maybe they have a misperception of budgeting because how can you not love having money for yourself? Like, think about it. If you go to Starbucks every day for 1 month, that's about $300, give or take, for a $10 latte. Do you know how much money you'll have at the end of the year? Just investing that $300 every month into a high yield savings account is not $1,200. And I think that's what's most important. You only dislike budgeting if you don't realize what it can do for you and your future self.
Good morning. You're listening to Money Matters. I'm Chris Hensley. We have a fantastic show lined up for you today. I've got my friend Jabez here with me today, and this is really a continuation of a conversation that we had on Monday. Now, about 2.5 years ago, I started a podcast tour to promote the 10-year anniversary of Money Matters. I had a personal goal of reaching out to 30 different podcast hosts to get the message out. And your show at the time, I was thankful enough that you had me on there. Fast forward to recently, you reached out to me and you are starting a new show. So, separate from the Boardroom podcast, you have recently started a new podcast that is focused on the working budget. So let's start. I'm super excited because I know you and we've been talking and with this kind of a continuation of that conversation. But for listeners who would like to get to know you a little bit better, can you share a little bit about yourself and then tell us a little bit about the new podcast, The Working Budget?
Okay, perfect. And thanks for having me, Chris. I do appreciate the invite. This is my first podcast appearance. So to have it with a friend, really special. To get started, very simply, my name is Jabez Roberts. You coined that pronunciation of my name just now, it's starting to grow on me. Uh, we met about 2.5 years ago on my first podcast, the Boardroom podcast. Now, on the Boardroom podcast, that's where we talk primarily about business, entrepreneurship, and how to navigate a life of business in lieu of your daily life. So it was more about business and entrepreneurship. The working budget, which we had our first episode on Monday, you were our first guest. That's primarily about what it says, the working budget. How do we navigate today's financial times? I think that money knowledge is something that we need not only know, but practice. And I was very honored and ecstatic actually to have you on for the premiere episode. And I'm looking forward to our chat today.
Well, so that is, I 100% agree. The topic is fantastic there. Now you're there in Jamaica, and the reason I bring that up, we're here in the States. The first time that we tried to connect and do the podcast, there literally was an earthquake right before that, right? And so, right before we hit record on the national disaster, we're here in Houston and Texas, the Gulf Coast. We have hurricanes, so there was that connection point for sure there. But I love the topic. I think this is a really good direction for you. I'm going to pivot a little bit because on Monday's recording on your show, you voluntarily connected Kaizen to compound interest. Where does that connection live for you?
All right, so that earthquake was a game changer. It knocked the communications out. Everyone was in a panic. Work stopped for most people half day, and a lot of things were destroyed, but no one was killed, and I'm thankful for that. As it comes to compound interest and Kaizen, Kaizen comes from the Japanese culture where they believe that constant tiny improvement is more important than spurts, doing a lot of work in spurts. And I think one of the biggest embodiments of that is they don't have a literal word in Japanese that translates to retirement as we speak about it in the Western countries here. Now, retirement means you leave your work and pretty much go off to die. And that doesn't happen in Japan. And that's because work is a part of your development. And the reason why all of this relates to compound interest is because compound interest can work for or against you. Now, in the context of working for you, compound interest is literally daily improvements. Now, if you look on it on the face of things, you might have an investment fund or investment vehicle of some kind, or you might be practicing a new skill. The way that compound interest can be best explained in lieu of these two examples is that yesterday you made one step forward, today you make another step forward. But the starting point today is the ending point yesterday, which is a step forward, meaning that tomorrow you may do another step, but you're actually starting from 2 steps forward versus where you initially started. And I think that gives you the beauty and the power of compound interest and Kaizen. Not only can your investments grow, but you as a person, and you should know, I hope everyone knows this, your most important investment is always in yourself. You also can grow from tiny increments each day.
I love that. I'm going to move on to the second question here. Now, you ran the Boardroom podcast for over a year. Now you've relaunched as the Working Budget. What changed for you? What was Boardroom missing that Working Budget gives you now?
I'm going to tell you a story that's going to shock you. So I've been in entrepreneurship, running my own business since the seventh grade. So in the seventh grade, I was selling sweets illegally at school, and that was my first foray into entrepreneurship. Didn't end so well. My inventory got stolen. I didn't have security on hand, and I was running an illegal business, so I couldn't go to the police, aka the teachers, right? So I started
Right.
entrepreneurship back then. I went seriously into it in about 2015, doing a business with my brother. And from that point until about 2 years ago, I only knew the financial health of my business around tax season. When the taxes were done and I saw the balance sheet, I saw the income statement or my P&L, and I realized that, oh, so that's where my money is going. That wasn't good enough. On the Boardroom podcast, it primarily teaches about building a business, how to market, how to get sales, to create a sales team, how to balance your work and your life. And that's all fine and dandy. But that's a very small subset of the population. And at the core, I really want to help people. The working budget works alongside the Boardroom podcast in that the working budget is going to help us understand how money moves throughout the economy. And the economy is not just the country, it's also your personal economy. How your money moves from a paycheck to your expenses, to your investments, to your pleasure spends, and to your retirement, which is also very important, even at the age of 20. So it's really just to bring light to the importance of daily money management and keeping up to date with your finances.
The story you shared about the candy, right? So I remember some of my first entrepreneurial efforts were selling the newspaper door to door, and people looking at you
Wow.
through the window and just not answering the door. So I think we get
Yes,
that in our
I
blood early on, that entrepreneur spirit. Now, walk me through who actually listens to the Working Budget, not the demographic, but the human picture. Who's the person you're recording each episode for?
So I have two demographics and they tend to overlap. For the Boardroom podcast, I get a lot of people who want to start businesses, people who love podcasts, people who want to learn about entrepreneurship, and they have a place where they can congregate and learn from people who have done exactly what they want to do. That kind of direction and education from a practical point of view, someone who's actually done it, not from a theoretical point of view, I think that beats any degree that you're ever going to get. Not to say you shouldn't go to university, not to say you shouldn't get a degree, but the power is really in the application of knowledge. It's not in the acquisition of knowledge. For the working budget, our target audience is the everyday person. It doesn't have to be a financial planner. It doesn't have to be an economist. Heck, it doesn't even have to be an adult. It can just be a college student trying to figure out how to go to college without falling into debt. And that's why we're not only going to interview the experts, but we're also going to speak with the daily person, the average Joe, who's figured out something that's working for them. No, important to note, this is not about getting rich quick. This is not about the best stocks to buy. This is about how to manage your money so that it works for you.
I love that. That when I started Money Matters many years ago, that is very similar to the same vision. You said the average Joe, that person on the street, those real life experiences. I think that is fantastic. Now, I notice you have a stack of books there on your desk. You reference books a lot. I remember last time we talked about Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Richest Man in
Oh, yes.
Babylon, the 70-20-10 ratio. What's the book that most shaped how you think about money?
Wow. The book that most shaped how I think about money. I think I'm still gonna have to go with The Richest Man in Babylon. And the
Hmm,
reason why I go with
love
that
that.
book is because growing up, you always hear that you should save. And I don't know if I'm hard headed and stubborn, or I just need to understand what I'm doing and why. But when I read The Richest Man in Babylon, it's basically fables. Now, they could be true, they could not be true. It doesn't matter to me. It's the lesson behind the fables that's important. It tells a story of people going from poverty to wealth and wealth to poverty and the practical lessons behind the fall and rise of these gentlemen. And the thing that I love most about The Richest Man in Babylon is that each money lesson, as you would put it, is told and taught in a relatable story that applies not only in the time of Babylon, which we know was one of the world's superpowers at one point, but also of how it can apply to you today. The stories are that relatable. So, from a practical perspective, just on how to manage money, I'd have to go with The Richest Man in Babylon.
Good choice. Good choice. One of the things we did talk about on your show on Monday was kind of a younger audience. So sometimes if we have somebody that's maybe in their early 20s, if a 22-year-old listener walked up and asked you for the one book to start with on money, what would you hand them?
The one book to start with on money. I'll tell you what, it really does depend on the individual. For a general book, you could go with Rich Dad Poor Dad. But for most people, I would still go with The Richest Man in Babylon. For some people, so it depends. Like I said, if it's someone, so I'm going to categorize so our listeners can have a very good idea of what works for them. If you have no idea about how money works, you're not from wealth, you don't have people in your family who have been good with money. Not because your family doesn't have money, mean that money can't come from. You just need to learn from someone who has money and who teaches well how to manage money. For that person, The Richest Man in Babylon would be number one. If it's somebody who's been around wealth somewhat and they don't really understand how it works, then you're going to go with Rich Dad Poor Dad. And for everyone who is in these categories, I am going to ask that you read a second book. Now, this book is going to be called, I just had it on the tip of my tongue. Yes, One Up on Wall Street by Peter Lynch.
Mhm.
And it's going to talk about investment. Now, I'm pretty sure at some point we'll touch on investment, but quite simply, after you've gone through The Richest Man in Babylon, after you've gone through Rich Dad Poor Dad, the idea of saving is going to be emphasized. And saving only works to a certain point. At some point after that, you're going to want to invest. And investment is where your money is going to actually start working for you, making money for you while you sleep. So, two books. Always go to One Upon Wall Street by Peter Lynch and then one of Rich Dad Poor Dad or The Richest Man in Babylon. And if you're an avid reader, you can go with all three.
All three of them are great. In fact, the one up on Wall Street, I read that when it came out back in the 90s. One of my
Wow.
first investment accounts was through Fidelity. And so that was when Peter Lynch was running Magellan. And being somebody who studied philosophy, I had an affinity with him because he was a philosophy major. And so a lot of finance people, they have business, they have, accounting backgrounds, but he had that philosophy background where I was like, okay, this is that. So that one stuck with me. I think that's a great one. Say people go out there and get it and read it. Now there's a quiet stewardship undertone in everything that you do. And I know this from talking with you here. Is that a deliberate choice for the working budget, or is it just who you are?
It's well become. Initially, I would say it was always there, but not emphasized much enough. Initially, I wanted to be a billionaire. And the reason why was because I wanted to help people. And I realized that with wealth come a certain level of influence and power. And that was the primary reason. One, I would have the money to do it myself. I wouldn't have to depend on others to, move the needle. But as time went by, I started to realize that I don't need to be a billionaire to help people. And I've realized that the quickest way and the most effective way to help someone is giving them practical advice and direction on how they can help themselves. And this is powerful because you can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved, but someone who wants to make something of themselves, they want to change their lives. Sometimes, and most times, they just need a bit of inspiration, perhaps just 1%, 0.5% of motivation, and everything else is just practical education and direction in which direction to go and what to do to change their lives.
I love that. That's a great answer there. What's been the hardest part of building your business as a one person leveraged operation while running the podcast on top of everything else?
The hardest part is definitely connecting with the right people. So we always have this question, which one came first, the chicken or the egg, right? Well, in my business, the question is always going to be which one is going to come first, helping others or getting help financially. And I've decided to separate the two. If you help people, the money will come. But if the money comes and you're not helping anyone, then the money will go. Therefore, help people. So I would think that is not even a question anymore of which is harder. It's a question of which is more important. And I've narrowed down on helping people. So unbeknownst to you, one of the things that I've figured out quite recently, literally last night, was the exact direction I want to take my company, Zelhan. So under Zelhan, that's where we operate the Boardroom podcast. But Zelhan was primarily about helping businesses, connecting businesses with their ideal clients and customers, websites, marketing, growth strategies, stuff like that. And we did well. We got a lot of results, but the results were fragmented in the sense that only a few people were benefiting because there are only so many people we can help. So I've decided to take Zealand in a media first direction. And the idea is we're going to build the foremost education platform for Caribbean nationals to learn not only about business and entrepreneurship, but finance and money management so that more people can get their life going in the right direction.
I love that. When you have a mission like that to help others, to have the stewardship in there, doing it at scale, it's being able to help more people at once, and really, that is a great direction. I love that. Where do you want the working budget to be in 12 months? Not just downloads. What does success look like for you? Who's listening that isn't listening now?
It's hard to measure our success by views and downloads. And so last night I watched a video from Stephen Bartlett, and he's from the Diary of a CEO. And he said one of his metrics that he realized early on was that he created a lot of viral campaigns, advertisements, and people would not remember it, right? So you'd get 30 million, hundreds of millions. I think he said the average view was between 4 and 30 million. So it was about 10 million views per campaign that he created. But once someone watched it, it's like a viral clip on TikTok. You watch a video, it's funny, and you move on 5 minutes later, you don't remember it. That's not impact, that's reach. How many people see your content? Impact is when he started his podcast, The Diary of a CEO, and he got, let's say, 10,000 views, 100,000 views, but 100 times more people would stop him in the street and talk specifics about what they learn and how the content helped them. So the success metric isn't even about views and downloads. It's literally about lives change. Now, lives change is hard to measure because someone might have their life changed and not reach out and say, hey, this is what your content did for me. But I am confident that if the content is being put out in such a way that is providing value in a practical sense. And if it doesn't meet a certain threshold, we trash it. That would be where I wanted to, for who is the listener. I want everyone to listen. I want grandma to listen. I want dad to listen. I want my brother, my son. And if my son has a son, I want everyone to listen. The reason is that financial education doesn't have to be gated or age related. And you taught me a valuable lesson about how you even help your kids handle finances and saving. And that's what I want more people to tune in and get practical lessons that is literally changing their lives, even if I don't know how many people's lives have been changed.
What a great message there. I did pick up when you said that if it doesn't meet your standards, you throw it out. Right? I hear taste, I hear
Yes.
quality, I hear you putting, if you're going to put your name on it, it's good stuff. So I love that. And, there's a lot of stuff that's out there that's not great. So, having that filter, that's worked well for your other show. And I'm sure on the working budget, it's going to work just as well for this. Where can listeners find the working budget and stay connected with what you're building?
So the Working Budget and the Boardroom podcast are both part of the Zelhan brand. You can find both shows at media.zelhan.com, or you can simply go to YouTube and type in Zelhan, the Boardroom podcast. Our YouTube channel will appear with all relevant links to Spotify, Apple, our blog, our primary website, and partner websites as well. The easiest place I would say definitely is YouTube today, though.
YouTube's it's a huge place for people to see all of this stuff. So that's a good place to point them there. For listeners who'd like to find more, that's where we will point you. And what have I forgot to ask you that you'd like to share with listeners today?
So, what is my philosophical view of money? Um, we can take a look at stocks, for example, and we realize that money is emotional, not the money itself, but the person using the money, right? So, if we look at Nvidia, we see a very high valuation, and whether or not the company is providing that level of utility and help to the general public, that's up for debate. The SpaceX IPO, I think they say it's going to be 1.75 trillion, and they made what, 20 billion in profits? No, they made a $20 billion loss last year, I believe. So money is emotional. It doesn't have to make logical sense. It has to make emotional sense, which means that when it comes to handling money and a general appreciation for money, the less emotional you can be, the more of an advantage you have. So the impulse buys, not really necessary most of the time. It's an emotion. However, those things that are necessary, saving for retirement, you don't see the value of it at 20 years old. At 30 years old, it's in the back of your mind, but at 50 is pretty pressing. So I think money in its overall essence is nothing more than a tool and is highly emotional today because of how it's being used. However, if you can look at it from a logical perspective, that it's a tool and how I use it determine what return I get from it, then you'll be way ahead of a curve.
A lot of good stuff there. I love that. The idea of if you're less emotional and coming at it in a logical way, that can work in your favor. You did mention some life events. You talked about retirement, and these things that do come online, whether you're looking for it or not, it's going to come, right? So having that on your radar for
Yes.
sure is a huge thing. And then handling money, just the idea of handling it with less emotion, that ties back into the budget. What can you tell us about budgeting and the idea of keeping a budget?
So budgeting is the roadmap to financial success. You don't hop in your car, start driving, and hope you end up somewhere safe, somewhere pleasurable. Before you get in the car, you have an idea of where you want to go. If you've been there before and you have a preferred route, then perfectly fine. If it's your first time, that's where Google Maps comes into play. And in my country, they have an app called Waze. That's where the roadmap comes into play. It's just an insurance, and a pathway to get to where you want to be. The budget is similar. You don't just get your paycheck, you don't just get your dividends on your investment and say, you know what, it'll all work out someday. Yeah, it will, but perhaps not in your favor. So having just a plan and sticking to that plan is important. I also want to emphasize that of equal importance of having a budget is also understanding how to execute on that budget. As frictionless as possible as you can make saving and investing, you should do that. And then you spend what's left, because then it's not a matter of giving up something that you want. It's a matter of earning what you want because you've fulfilled your obligations to your future self in saving and investing.
I love that. That makes a lot of sense. Those are all good ideas around the idea of budgeting. What would you say to somebody who you tell them that and they're like, I just don't like budgeting?
Maybe they have a misperception of budgeting, because how can you not love having money for yourself? Like, think about it. If you go to Starbucks every day for 1 month, that's about $300, give or take, for a $10 latte. Do you know how much money you'll have at the end of the year? Just investing that $300 every month into a high yield savings account is not $1,200. And I think that's what's most important. You only dislike budgeting if you don't realize what it can do for you and your future self. And you should also think about that one time something terrible happened and it was an absolute disaster. How much easier would it have been to handle that emergency or that difficult time in life if you had, for example, an emergency fund, or you had some cash to fall back on, or you had an investment that you could sell to see to that healthcare emergency or even take care of your parents. Budgeting is your best friend if you understand how it works for you.
And I think that is a great space we're bumping right here towards the end of the show. In the last 2 minutes or so here, what would you like to share with listeners on a closing note?
Don't wait on the government, your parents, your senator to make things work for you. We're in an age where information is most readily available than at any point in history. If there is something that you want, and I'm pretty sure you're on the right path if you're listening because you've taken the first step to gather information, just go for it. It's going to be a little bit difficult. You are going to get knocked down 10 times, perhaps 20. Just get up one more time and keep going. And in a few years, remember Kaizen, remember compounding interest. In a few years of consistent effort, you'll be extremely surprised by where you are, because where you are today is far ahead of where you were last week, this day.
The show is The Working Budget. I encourage everybody to go and listen. We're just right at the beginning there, but I know based on the Boardroom podcast you're going to have a bunch of great guests on there, and it's going to be high quality. So I encourage everybody to follow along. Thank you so much. I know we're going to have another one of these down the road as well. We'll talk again after that show's been going and have another interview to follow up on it. Have a good rest of the day there.
Thank you, Chris. It's been wonderful, and have a wonderful day to all your listeners.